أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن كل من في السماوات والأرض إلا آتي الرحمن عبدا. لقد أحصاهم وعدهم عدا وكلهم آتيه يوم القيامة فردا. إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات سيجعل لهم الرحمن ودا. فإنما يسرناه بلسانك لتبشر به المتقين وتنذر به قوما لدا. وكم أهلكنا قبلهم من قرن هل تحس منهم من أحد أو تسمع لهم ركزا. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. طه ما أنزلنا عليك القرآن لتشقى. ما أنزلنا عليك القرآن لتشقى إلا تذكرة لمن يخشى. تنزيلا ممن خلق الأرض والسماوات العلى. ما لتشقى إلا تذكرة لمن يخشى. تنزيلا ممن خلق الأرض الأرض والسماوات العلى الرحمن على العرش استوى له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وما بينهما وما تحت الثرى وإن تجهر بالقول فإنه يعلم السر وأخفى وإن تجهر بالقول فإنه يعلم السر وأخفى الله لا إله إلا هو له الأسماء الحسنى وهل أتاك حديث موسى الله لا إله إلا هو له الأسماء الحسنى وهل أتاك حديث موسى إذ رأى نارا فقال لأهلهم كثوا إني آنست نارا نارا لعلي آتيكم منها بقبس أو أجد على النار هدى فلما أتاها نودي يا موسى إني أنا ربك فاخلع نعليك إنك بالوادي المقدس طوى وأنا اخترتك اخْتَرْتُكَ فَاسْتَمِعْ لِمَا يُوحَى فَلَمَّا أَتَاهَا نُودِيَ يَا مُوسَىٰ فاخلع نعليك إنك بالوادي المقدس طوى وأنا اخترتك فاستمع لما يوحى إني أنا ربك فاخلع نعليك إنك بالوادي المقدس طوى وأنا اخترتك فاستمع لما يوحى إنني أنا الله لا إله إلا أنا فاعبدني وأقم الصلاة لذكري صدق الله العظيم.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. As we are about to talk, the invasion of Gaza has begun. And all we can do as Muslims, unfortunately, is do dua. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, نسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى أن يثبتهم وأن ينصرهم على أعدائهم وأن يجعلنا وإياكم ممن يفرح بنصر الله إن شاء الله. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِنَ الْخَوْفِ وَنَقْصٍ من الأموال من شيء من الخوف والجوع ونقص من الأموال والثمرات والأنفس والثمرات وبشر الصابرين. So a Muslim is supposed to be tested in this life. There is nothing that you can stop. And actually, if you are not tested, there is a problem with your iman. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala يريد أن يمحص هذا الإيمان. So the issue is, what do you do as a Muslim when you are tested? The Quran tells us what a good Muslim should do. He should be patient. He should exercise sabr. فبشر الصابرين الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. What do they say? We are from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to Him we shall return. But then what does He tell us? أولئك عليهم صلوات من ربهم ورحمة. Meaning that those people will be blessed. Those are the ones who are winners. And what does a Muslim actually become a Muslim for? Is it not to make it to Jannah? Is it not so that he would not make it to hell? And the Prophet ﷺ tells us, ألا إن سلعة الله غالية ألا إن سلعة الله الجنة. You are basically trading a commodity with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, إن الله اشترى من المؤمنين أنفسهم Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually exchanged your soul. He bought from you, even though He gave it to you. But He's telling you that if you do certain things, I will reward you on the Day of Judgment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose Palestine to be Ard al-Ribat. As the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam tells us, لا تزال طائفة من أمتي. There will be a group from my ummah that will be fighting for the cause of Allah. لا يضرهم من خذلهم. They will not be harmed for those who betrayed them, who will not help them. أو عادهم. And then the companions asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says, where are they, O Prophet? He says, في بيت المقدس وأكناف بيت المقدس. In the areas of Bayt al-Maqdis, or as the surrounding area of Bayt al-Maqdis. Unfortunately, many Muslims who don't have a proper understanding of Islam would say to you, why did the Muslims of Gaza do what they did on October 6th? Why did they do it? Did it make any sense for them to have done that? And anybody who is looking at what's happening in that area in the Middle East, he realizes that basically the Muslims and the Arabs abandoned the cause of Palestine. And they already have normalization with Egypt. They have already normalization with Jordan. They have normalization with United Arab Emirates. They have normalization with Bahrain. And now what else? And Morocco. And what else now? Saudi Arabia is in the process of doing normalization. And what is the price that they are getting for this normalization? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The only thing that they are afraid, نخشى أن تكون علينا دائرة. Meaning that it's the only fear that they have is that no, we don't want to be on the side of those people because we don't want to be harmed. We want to protect our seat. That is the only concern that unfortunately Muslim and Arab leaders are concerned with. They're not concerned with their people. They're not concerned with the population. They're not even concerned with their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala under any circumstances. When somebody betrays Muslims in the way they do it, when the Prophet ﷺ tells us, مَنْ لَمْ يَهْتَمَّ بِأَمْرِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ فَلَيْسَ مِنْهُمْ. He who does not worry or doesn't concern himself with other Muslims, he is not one of them. What is the definition, or how do we describe somebody who is an enemy of a good Muslim? Who is also professes to say, La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah, and prays 5 times a day, and goes to Umrah and goes to Hajj. And yet, he's an enemy of Islam. As far as I'm concerned, those are the munafiqeen, the hypocrites. That is why the hypocrites in our faith gets the severest punishment on the Day of Judgment. إِنَّ الْمُنَافِقِينَ فِي الدَّرَكِ الْأَسْفَلِ مِنَ النَّارِ. They are in the lowest and the worst portion of Jahannam on the Day of Judgment. So let's go back as to why Hamas or the Muslims of Gaza have done what they've done. Why does a person sometimes strive and work hard? Is it not in order for him to gain something? A student who goes to medical school doesn't study night and days for nothing. He studies because he wants the reward of becoming a doctor and earn the money that a doctor makes and all of that. And somebody who is oppressed for 17 years in Gaza, aside from the fact that they had to actually migrate in 1948, most of the people in Gaza, 60% of the people in Gaza are actually people who were forced out of their homes from Jaffa, Lid, and all of those areas in 1948, and they went to Gaza. And they already have had the hardship for almost 75 years. But in the past 16 years or 17 years, they had to endure a siege by their enemies who are the Israelis, and by their brethren who is Egypt, unfortunately. And the problem is they want a way out. They have to. You cannot. Many people say that Gaza is an open air prison. We should never use that terminology, because a prison usually is for criminals. It is a concentration camp. It is a concentration camp for people who have committed nothing but aspire for freedom, aspire for free movement, aspire for self-determination. And they are denied that self-determination, they are denied that aspiration. So their hope is to basically stop the normalization with Saudi Arabia, so that it will become, that to bring the Palestinian issue back to the forefront, so that hopefully something can be done about it. Secondly, to inflict a punishment on the Israelis and make them realize that they cannot do things with immunity. They feel that they are immune to any punishment, no matter what. And for the first time in modern history, they have taken a punishment that they actually cannot comprehend. And that's why they feel that their army's credibility is at question. They feel that they have to get that credibility back, and the respect that they are now lost, and I believe they lost it forever. The unfortunate part is that the American administration, for the first time, has done something that no other administration has done, which is basically come to the aid of Israel in such a way that they are basically complicit in what's happening in Gaza. They have partnered with the Israelis by giving them special weapons, by giving them bunker busters bombs, by giving them qanabil irtijaji. I don't know what that terminology for it, but it's almost weighs 1,500 pounds in terms of TNT in it. When it goes into an area, it basically shakes the entire area. And we have seen the brutality of what the Israelis have done in Gaza. I mean, there are people who are driven by the way, driven by religious conviction. If you go back to they sometimes complain to us about وَقَاتُلُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. Why do you say, fight those who are kafir? In their Bible or in the Old Testament, Talmud, in Deuteronomy chapter 20, what do they say? They say that God ordered Moses to order the people of his troops to go and kill every single person in the Canaanites. A child, a woman, a baby, everybody. And to take any of the young ladies that are between the age, below the age of 12, to take him as ladies that they can enjoy. This is their faith. This is what they actually believe. And if you listen to some of their rabbis, they actually not only say that this is that they should be even more brutal than what God has ordered Moses to do. And we believe, of course, as Muslims, that the Torah and the Old and the Injil have been corrupted and have added to it. يكتبون الكتاب بأيديهم ثم يقولون هذا من عند الله. They write the book with their own hands and they say this is from Allah. Why? ليكسبوا به ثمنا قليلا. So that they, somehow expand their power as rabbis and as priests. This is the unfortunate reality. So Muslims have to understand one thing, that the test is here. We cannot avoid it. And we cannot second guess ourselves as to what happened. Why did the Muslims of Palestine do what they did in October? We have an issue at this point. And that issue is, how can we help the Palestinians today? How can we help our Muslim brothers. The Prophet ﷺ tells us, Al-Muslimu lil-Muslim, a Muslim to another Muslim, كالبنيان يشد بعضه بعضا. Meaning it's like, almost like you are building a house. Each brick complements the other brick. يشد بعضه بعضا. So it strengthens each other. So that's how a Muslim. المسلم المسلم إذا اشتكى منه عضو, meaning that if a person, a Muslim to a Muslim, is like with the same body, that إذا اشتكى منه عضو, if a certain part of it aches, the entire body goes into fever, trying to cure that aching or that illness. So if you are a Muslim and you do not have, and you don't have that, that fever, your iman should be checked with a thermometer. And that thermometer is, how do you feel about the people in Gaza? How do you feel about the people in Kashmir? How do you feel about anybody, any Muslim who's oppressed anywhere on the face of this earth? And if you're not concerned with them, then you really need to question your iman. It's as simple as that. So, look at how they are putting this narrative that they have from day one. Biden being the biggest liar, and a man who professed from a long time ago, he says, I'm a Zionist. I'm a Zionist. In another statement, he says, if there was no Israel, we would have created it. This is the kind of man that we are dealing with. A man who is, by the way, they look at it as a religious imperative for them to conquer Gaza and to conquer Palestine. Because they believe, as Christians and as Jews, that for the second coming of the Messiah on the Jewish side, and for the second coming of Jesus, Al-Haykal needs to be built. So to them, it's a religious imperative that the Haykal, that the Al-Aqsa Mosque is destroyed. And on that piece of land where the Aqsa sits right now, they want to build their Haykal. And if that is allowed, would be a shame on Muslims till the day of judgment. So inshallah, that will never come about. So that's a religious imperative. So we have to understand that mentality. And the mentality of them on day one, what does he say? He goes and he says, I have seen the video and confirmed the killing of beheading, not killing, beheading of 40 babies. Imagine the kind of anger and the emotional enthusiasm that takes over the people in general, that somebody is willing to kill that many babies. And we as Muslims, we know what the Prophet ﷺ told us in terms of rules of war. لا تقتلوا شيخا. You cannot kill an older man. You cannot kill a priest. You cannot kill a woman. You cannot kill a child. You cannot uproot a tree. All of these are rules prior to even the modern day rules of engagement and the Geneva Convention. All of that was decided by us as Muslims. And we have to understand that. But look at how that narrative is. That narrative reminds me of the story of Musa alayhi salam. When Musa alayhi salam went to Pharaoh, and he says, give me the people of Israelites. He says, oh, didn't we raise you, oh Moses? Didn't we raise you? And then you killed somebody. فعلت فعلتك التي فعلت وكنت من الكافرين. You were so ungrateful by killing that person. He's remembering, the Pharaoh is remembering that Moses killed somebody by accident. But he doesn't remember that he was the one to order the killing of every single child of the Israelites. يقتلون أبناءكم ويستحيون نساءكم وفي ذلكم بلاء من ربكم عظيم. All of that he forgot. And this is exactly what the West tries to do. They forgot the 75 years history and the torture and the occupation. They forgot all about that. They only remember what happens on October 7th. 6th or 7th. This is the kind of hypocrisy that we are dealing with. What's unfortunate also is that many Arabs and Muslims acquiesce to that kind of a scenario and are accepting of it. And not only that, some of them actually push it, like United Arab Emirates, like Morocco, like you have some of those Arab leaders who are actually take the same narrative that the Israelis have and push it. So what has changed during that time period from almost 20 days now? We have something called social media. And social media has allowed us ability to at least modify that narrative a little bit. Why? Americans, by the way, Americans and even Jews, which we have a problem with, they have a certain amount of conscience. Not all of them are bad. Many are very good and conscientious of what they do. And they don't like to see bloodshed, and they don't like to see injustice, and they don't like to see all the things that we Muslims consider to be dear to us. And they are seeing exactly what's happening in Gaza. They're seeing the agonies. They're seeing the dead kids, the 2,700 or 3,000 child who have been killed. They're seeing the massive destruction. They're seeing the bombing of hospitals, the bombing of a church. And all of that is changing the narrative a little bit to the point where it's actually forcing some officials to change the language that they are using. There was actually initially, when this happened, there was the State Department instructed all officials within it not to use 3 words: de-escalation, ceasefire, or I don't know what the last one, but those two words that I remember. Maybe the third one will come to my mind. But they didn't want to, because they wanted to give Israel, they gave Israel the green light to basically do whatever it can in order to annihilate the people of Gaza. The plan is, unfortunately, even though we are saying it and the Palestinians are the ones who started it, this is a master plan that's called the century deal, the deal of the century, which was orchestrated initially by Trump, but it didn't come about. If you look at in Egypt right now, in El Arish, in an area adjacent to Gaza, they actually removed all the people of Arish and they moved them out of there completely. Yet they built certain infrastructure that allows for water and for services to be rendered. So there is a plan to try to create another Nakba for the Palestinians by moving them from Gaza and moving them where? To Egypt. And unfortunately, the Arab leaders are actually very good at controlling their own people. You see them in Jordan, even though the majority are Palestinians, and the Jordanians are very, very, very good people, they are unable to actually do anything against the Israelis. Look at Egypt. Since 2000, since the Arab Spring, I mean, the guy is putting 60,000, 70,000 people in jail, and he's basically you cannot say a word against him without going to prison. And yet, the Egyptian people, unfortunately, they have basically remained silent and are unable to revolt against him. The same thing happened in Syria, the same thing. So unfortunately, they know that if we move the Palestinians under Egyptian rule, it becomes an Egyptian problem, not an Israeli problem. But they don't understand that the Palestinians, no matter the Hamas idea or the resistance idea, is not something that you can take it out of one's mind or heart. And no matter what happens, and I believe, as a Muslim, I believe that, inshallah, the Israelis will fail in their efforts. And I believe that the munafiqeen shall also fail, inshallah, in their efforts. Our leaders, unfortunately, all of them, the Muslims, the Arabs, they're all looking for recognition by the West. They're looking for acceptance by the West. The Quran tells us so clearly, أَيَبْتَغُونَ عِنْدَهُمُ الْعِزَّةِ. Is that what they are looking for? They're looking for status, for acceptance. فَإِنَّ الْعِزَّةَ لِلَّهِ وَلِرَسُولِهِ وَالْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Izzah is to the believer. And no matter what the price that the Muslims are paying, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that the shaheed is not a dead person. وَلَا تَقُولُوا لِمَنْ يُقْتَلُ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتٍ وَاللَّهِ أَنِّي أَغْبِطُهُمْ. I am jealous, but jealous in a good way, that I wish I would receive shahada. How could you, as a Muslim, that you die, but you don't die? You get killed, but you are still alive. فَرِحِينَ بِمَا آتَاهُمُ اللَّهُ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ. They're happy. They're happy from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them. We should not belittle that. We should not be unhappy for them. But you know what breaks one's heart? Is when you see a child who loses his mother and father. When you see a father and mother who lose their kids. That hurts. We as humans, you know, the Prophet ﷺ, when he lost his son, he says, إِنَّ الْعَيْنَ لَتَدْمَعُ. You know, that they can't help it. القلب لا يحزن. The heart aches. And you may actually cry. ولكننا نقول ما لا نقول إلا ما يرضي الله إنا لله وإنا إليه. We only say what pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because we are His creations. Whatever He does to us, we are His creation. But that's why in the Quran He says, رضي الله عنهم ورضوا عنه. Why this is the highest accolade that you can give to a Muslim, is that imagine a king or a leader who says to you, are you happy with me? Are you happy with me? Well, the King of Kings is telling you, are you happy with me? رضي الله عنهم. So when you are accepting of what happens to you as a Muslim, and that's why the Prophet ﷺ says, ألا إن كل أمر المسلم خير. Everything that happens to a believer is good. If something good happens, he's thankful. فكان خيرا له. And if he has a calamity, he is patient. فكان خيرا له. وليس ذلك إلا للمؤمن. And this is only for the believer. So we as believers, we should not become despondent in any way. Just like we should not be despondent when we are sinners. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فلا, you know, قل لعبادي الذين أسرفوا على أنفسهم لا تقنطوا من رحمة الله إن الله يغفر الذنوب جميعا. Just like when it comes to sin, those people who sin and they need to repent, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the door is open. We should never become despondent, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised us that when in tansurullaha yansurkum. If we are on the side of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will be on our side. The unfortunate part is that we have, as Muslims, we have a collective responsibility and we have an individual responsibility. The Sheikh was reading from Surah Maryam and Surah Taha. وَكُلٌّ آتِيهِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ فَرْدًا. Everybody is going to be made to account on the day of judgment for what he does on an individual basis, even though he may do it in a collective manner. But you will be responsible on the day of judgment. You will be asked, what have you done for Gaza? What have you done for the Muslims who are oppressed? And if you don't have an answer, may Allah help us all. Because when we think about it, when we think about the Mujahideen, the three in Surah At-Tawbah, when he talks about the three who did not have a proper excuse for staying behind for Ma'rakat Tabuk, what did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would not speak to them for almost 70 days. حَتَّى ضَاقَتْ عَلَيْهِمُ الْأَرْضُ بِمَا رَحُبَتْ. Till they felt that they are almost suffocating. What do we have if we are called to war now, or if we are called for jihad? How many of us will actually come up and do it? Wallahi, it's a scary scenario when you think about it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we are fortunate that we are not being asked to do that, but we are asked to help. So you can help by talking to your neighbor. You can help by sharing videos. You can help by sending money. You can help by call up your senators, call up your congressmen, call up your town even, on a city council level. Everybody, we should do everything possible in order for us to at least potentially have an excuse with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله العظيم لي ولكم ويا فوز المستغفرين. جزاكم الله خير.
Would you be able to elaborate the normalization? You used the word, the relationship of normalization. Can you elaborate that?
Well, normalization is basically, the Saudis, normalization is for them to accept Israel and be able to trade with it and have an embassy in Tel Aviv or maybe even in Jerusalem, and for them to have access to Saudi Arabia, where the Israelis can come openly, just like what happens in the United Arab Emirates. United Arab Emirates, this is what's funny is that today I was reading an article about somebody who actually donated $170 million. An Emirati guy, businessman, donated $170 million to the Israelis. $170 million to the Israelis. How the heck does he justify that? This is the sad part of what's happening. When the ummah is divided and weak, that's why when the Prophet ﷺ, he says, تتداعى الأمم على أمتي كما تتداعى الأكلة على قصعتها. قالوا ونحن من قلة يومئذ يا رسول الله. قال لا بل أنتم كثير. He says that people rush on the Muslims like when they rush to eat their food. He says, are we few on that day, O Prophet? He says, no, you are too many. We are many, but we are weak. And the reason we are weak is because we are afraid of risking our resources. We are risking what? Life. ولكن الله كتب في قلوبكم الوهن قالوا وما الوهن يا رسول الله. What is وهن? He says حب الدنيا, the love of this life, وكراهية الموت, and the hate of dying. As a Muslim, no Muslim should be looking forward to dying. But as a Muslim, when you know that ولا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون إن الذين تتوفاهم ملائكة, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that a Muslim, when he dies, there is no fear and there is no sadness, then it's not as bad as, say, an atheist would think about it. I'd like to hear everybody's comments and elaboration. Brother Ihab.
So I thought you would be talking a little bit about history, how we got to this point. Because I was talking with one of the brothers, and he did not clearly understand what happened. How did we lose Palestine? How did we lose Al-Quds?
Okay, I can. Is that something that you guys are not familiar with?
I'm familiar with that.
If anybody is not familiar with it, I can go give you a quick. Okay. The Jews were basically persecuted in Europe, and they were not well liked for a variety of reasons. And what happened is that it began back in 1896, when the Zionist Congress actually met, and they said, we have a problem having Jews all over the place, and they're not being well treated. Let's create a homeland somewhere. And they actually looked at different places. They looked at Uganda, they looked at other areas in Latin America, and they looked at Palestine was one of them. And of course, Palestine represented the best option for them because of the fact that they were in it at one point during the time of Dawood alayhi salam and Sulaiman, and when the Prophet Moses was told, when he left Egypt, he was told to enter the Al-Ard al-Muqaddasa. So they looked at that connection. Even though they're Zionists, and they don't believe, and most of them were atheists, yet they used the Bible as a motivation. You know what I'm saying? So people who don't believe in God, using God's commands to try to make a connection that Palestine should be the ones to. And of course, they lobbied the people in England and in Europe. And England at the time, in the early 1900s, was the strongest amongst the European countries. Balfour, in 1917, and Balfour, by the way, he hated Jews. It's not that he did it out of love. They wanted to really get rid of the Jews out of Europe. He promised the Jews at the time, the Zionists, that he would establish a homeland for them in Palestine. Palestine, during that time, just like most of the other countries, whether it's Egypt, Syria, and all of that, they were under different mandates. Palestine was under the British mandate, Syria was under the French, and Lebanon was under the French. Egypt was also under the British. And what happened is that they began to allow for migration of Jews into Palestine. And if you look at some of the interviews of, say, somebody like Golda Meir and Ishaq Rabin, they say, Golda Meir said, I'm a Palestinian. I actually have a Palestinian passport. I came and applied and I was granted a Palestinian passport. So there was, prior to 1948, it was all Palestine. But what happens is that when they start migrating to Palestine, they had a preferential treatment. The British would allow them to arm, would allow them to have arms, and suppressed any opposition by the Palestinians. And the Palestinians initially, when they were still a minority, they actually treated them very nicely and they didn't have an objection to it. And they even had a joint coins and all of that, and they accepted, they would give them actually citizenship. But the problem is, as it grew up, as they became an increasing minority, and they took up arms, the Palestinians realized that, we have a problem. Let's do something about it. And in 1929, the first revolt began, but then it was suppressed by the British. And the Palestinians continued to struggle. In 1936, they had the major strike in which they, for 6 months, and they were almost winning, but the Arabs first came in and said, no, we'll take care of it. We'll pay, we will resolve the issue. Don't worry. And then they were able to, basically pacify the Palestinians. And unfortunately, the Palestinians fell for it. And in 1947, 1948, that's when the Israelis began to militarily go against the British and the Palestinians. And they declared their, and of course, at the time, they went to the United Nations. The United Nations made a decision that to partition Palestine, where they gave a portion to the Arabs. But of course, the Arabs rejected it. Of course, you would reject it because somebody comes, you have a house. You just invited a guest, or a guest came, whether you liked him or you didn't, he is a guest. And now all of a sudden the guest is telling you, you know what? I'm going to take 2/3 of your house. So it's very, and then they blame you, the West blames you for not accepting that deal. Why didn't you accept it? You could have had something. So they committed atrocities in Deir Yassin and in other villages where they emptied almost 500 villages in Palestine. And how did they do it? By going to certain villages and actually killing every single person. So the news travels and people, fear for their lives. And it's not a strange thing for a person to be fearful for their life and their loved ones. So they left. But they left hoping that they would come back. But that was not the case. Whenever they left, they never came back. And that's why now they're trying to push the Palestinians in Gaza to Egypt. And you can come back. If they are pushed into Egypt, believe it or not, they will never come back. Because look at the Palestinians in Jordan, they've never come back. The Palestinians in Syria, they were never able to come back. In Lebanon, they were never able to come back. In any part that they went to. And we have been dispersed all over the place. So this is how it started. But the Jews have no claim to this land. We actually treated them nicely. And even, even Jews, some decent Jews who would say that somebody was telling them that, the Jews were not being treated nicely in Arab countries, and that's why they went to Palestine. And the Jew who was actually, what's his name? He actually writes for Haaretz, the Haaretz newspaper. He says, we were treated by Muslims better than we were ever treated by Christians. And that's true. Whether it was in Andalusia, or was it in Morocco, or Egypt, or Turkey, or any part of the Muslim world, actually, if you look at some of the, go on YouTube, there are videos how Islam saved Judaism, how Muslims saved Judaism. Because what happens is that the Christians didn't like the Jews at all, and they wanted to exterminate them. But the Muslims took them in. And this is the price we're paying for right now.
If I may add, the people who goes to the different land, they are nowhere, they are the no man land. They never get their any type of recognition.
Yeah.
So they live, refugees they may have no identification. No identity. And second, with the knowledge, the Hebrew in Jewish religious books are mainly written in Arabic, not in Hebrew most of them.
Yeah.
A lot of literature are based in Arabic script than Hebrew script.
Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead.
I mean, this is the 1948, and then there was the 1967.
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay. No, you add it. Since
Yeah. So 1967, there was the 6 Days War, and in this part, in 1948, when Israel had a war against several countries, at that time it was a group of gangs, basically terrorist gangs that were the Israeli army, but it was like 60,000 people, and they were fighting against 7 countries that brought up only 40,000 people. So they were 7 countries brought up less arms, less number of people than just the group of gangs that were in Israel at that time.
yeah, the Haganah and the Aragon.
Yeah, yeah. And that was lost, and basically Israel took more land than what was assigned to it by the United Nations decision in 47. But still we had the Masjid al-Aqsa. Masjid al-Aqsa we still had
Yeah.
control over. And we still had Gaza and Rafah and the West Bank. So of the
And Golan Heights.
yeah, and Golan Heights. And all of those were lost in 1967 war. So how did that 1967 war, and on top of all of those, these parts of Palestine that we still had control over them from 48 to 67. Jordan had control over the West Bank, Egypt had control over the Gaza, and the Golan was under the Syrians. And then what happened in 1967 is there was a war that was started by Israel at that time because of certain actions that gave it the chance to start that war. The certain actions that were done then in 1967 were the closing of the passage, the sea passage that, no, I don't need a microphone, I'm fine.
Yeah, go ahead.
Alhamdulillah. So the closing of the passage of Khalij al-Aqaba from
Yeah.
Madiq Tiran, and also
You guys sold it.
yeah yeah basically
No,
sold
you
it
gave it to the
Saudi
Saudis.
Arabia, yes.
You gave it to the Saudis.
Yes, Sisi sold it to Saudis, that's true. But that's recent. So at that time it was under the control of Egypt, that the water passage to the port of Eilat. And also there were some United Nations forces in Sinai at that time, so Egypt told them to leave. And those who were in there because of, in 1956, there was a war from Israel and France and UK at that time, and that war captured the Sinai, and then they left it back. They went back after they actually captured this piece of land. So Sinai is actually large area, and it is to the south of Palestine and to the east of Egypt, and it is part of Egypt, the peninsula of Sinai. So what happened in 1967 because of that? In 6 days, Israel attacked by Air Force, attacked Egypt and Syria, and they took over the West Bank. The West Bank, I mean, it was actually because of Jordan entered into the war just to lose it. So that's what happened in 1967.
I can just say one thing.
Yeah.
Our village was actually on the borders with 1948 Palestine, meaning that actually our school is in the Israeli proper, which means that we didn't have a single Jordanian soldier there in 1967. And we are actually right on the borders. And my father used to work for the American Embassy in Amman. And the guy, the ambassador tells him, he says, go and get your family. It was actually, because school ends in May, so we normally go to see our father in Amman. He told him, don't worry about it, just come. Nothing is going to happen in the East Bank, but the West Bank there's going to be a problem with it. Go and get your family. So my father actually came and took us, and we were never able to go back. Because the war took place after 6 days of being in Amman, and we were never able to go back.
Yeah, so the point here is, Israel took over the West Bank and Gaza in 1967, and that was just by war. That was never accepted or approved as a legal action. You see, the start of the country of Israel was covered by the United Nations decision, 1947. But the West Bank and Gaza are still occupied territories. They do not legally belong to Israel. They do not have the right to have settlements there. They do not have the right to occupy these lands. So resistance started. Resistance started after 1967. There was, of course, the 1973 war. In that war, Egypt crossed the Suez Canal in 1973 war. And as a result of that, there was some change of the balance, and then Israel decided that it will need to end this situation of war with Egypt because it is not working out. So they need some diplomatic efforts. You see, after 1967, Egypt and others tried to just get Israel to go back to its legal borders, and there was the UN and Security Council decisions 252 and others, but the 252 is interesting in that it says that Israel has to go back from occupied territories. So it had some ambiguity in it, but what it means is that the United States and the Soviet Union and all the major world powers did not recognize Israel taking over the West Bank or Gaza because they were taken by force. So after 1973, there was the Treaty of Peace between Sadat and Israel, and as a result of that, the rest of Sinai came back to Egypt, but Egypt went out of the equation. Went out of the equation that it is the largest Arab countries and it is the largest army in an Arab country, so it has its weight. Egypt has its weight, which is right now being destroyed. That Egypt weight is being destroyed in multiple different ways. You see, it was, Egypt does not have control Egyptians in general do not have the freedom of expression, do not have freedom of action, do not have freedom to choose their leaders, and do not have if you listen to the people right now, they would be 99% for Gaza and for the Palestinian brothers that are having this problem, this problem of occupation, this problem of injustice, this problem of all of these things. But what is happening on the ground is that Egypt is closing the borders. So it is participating in the war against Gaza. So you see this small piece of land that is Gaza right now, 2 million people, and the borders are closed down from Egypt. The borders are, all the other borders are with the state of occupation, with Israel. All the other borders, and all of that is closed. For 15 years or 17 years, nobody can go out or in without permissions. They have no airport, they have no port. If the fishermen try to go into the sea just to catch fish, around Gaza, they will get killed. Yeah. So it is a complete siege on this piece of land for the last 15 years. Why is that siege? It's because, you see, after 1967, Israel occupied Gaza completely. But they realized that that piece of land, then came the resistance. 1987, the Intifada of the rocks. So children in the streets were throwing rocks, and that is the Intifada of the rocks. And then in 2000, there was another more Intifada and more resistance. So Israel decided this is a small piece of land, large number of people, 2 million people in this just Gaza and around Gaza, one of the most dense pieces of land in the world. And they cannot control it. So the best way is to take their army out of Gaza, but to close it down. And this is how it became a concentration camp. Close it down completely. And actually the close down completely happened only after the elections. The elections of 2006.
2006, yeah.
Yeah, that Carter participated in, Carter and his organization, President Carter.
By the way, let me just say that, he's an Egyptian, so he cannot brag about Egypt. Brothers, Egypt is the center of the Arab world. If Egypt is isolated and we don't have Egypt on our side, the Arab world, they have 105 million people. And it's always been the center of power, and it's always been looked to by everybody as being, whatever they decide, we will go with it. And for them to have isolated Egypt and put it away, the Arabs are now weak. Unless Egypt goes back to the Arab fold and really begin to espouse or at least adopt an Arabic identity and a nationalist identity that identifies with the people of Egypt, meaning that it's, it answers to the people of Egypt, because the people of Egypt would never allow something like what's happening right now in Gaza, would never do that. But you have a leader who says, I don't care about all the people of Egypt. He doesn't care about anybody. And he's willing to do basically whatever Israel and what the United States wants him to do. It's as simple as that. So Egypt, to us, to the Arabs in general, if it prospers and if it's good, the entire ummah, at least the Arabic ummah, will be good, inshallah. And we're hoping that they will come back to where they used to be.
Where did Yasser Arafat fit into the story?
Yasser Arafat, you see, the PLO was started back in the 60s. And it started as a resistance movement, and it was supported by a lot of Arab countries and all that. And Arafat used to be the leader of it. But in 1993, when he decided that he wants to have peace and had what they call the Oslo Accord, what happened is that he gave up so much without gaining anything. They said to him, okay, we will give you the West Bank, and we will divide it into 3 different areas, A, B, C. A is you have total control over it. B, we have joint control.
and C is to be decided later. The problem with that is that after a few years, they didn't like what was happening, and they went into the West Bank. And even I remember George Bush, the father, telling them at the time, no, not the father, I think this is the son. He says, as a committed friend of Israel, I ask you to go back and relinquish what, your incursion into the West Bank. And then he said it the second time the following day. And then he was flooded with emails and telephone calls from the Zionists and the neo-Christians, the evangelical Christians. And then he stopped altogether. So what happened, if you remember, they even actually surrounded his compound and they bombarded it even. He was almost killed in that one. And what happens after that is that when they, this is what happened to him. So he had a lot of also, at one point, he was actually somewhat decent in the sense that he wanted a resistance, but he also wanted peace at the same time. But he was not as bad as Abbas, who's basically have sold it completely. Abbas is only interested in basically enlarging his pocket and making sure that he makes a lot of money. He doesn't care about, and he even described, when initially when they had the initial incursion in 2006 or something, where they had an incursion. According to an Israeli source, they were concerned, he was actually asking the Israelis as to why they didn't enter with an invasion into Gaza. And the Israeli told him, there are almost, you'd have almost 10,000 casualties and all that at that time. And he says, you know what he says? He says, they're all Hamas, you should have done that. So when you have a corrupt leaders and leaders who are only concerned about their seat, and they don't have nationalistic aspirations, and they're not devout to their own cause, they basically just, he's concerned about, being in 5-star hotels and being able to travel to different countries and be called, and his son now is almost a billionaire. I just found out that even Arafat, he had most of the money under his name, and when he died, most of that money has gone to his wife and his daughter. So, corruption, unfortunately, in the Arab world, and even to a greater degree also in the Muslim world, the people of those, or the shu'ub, the people of those countries are paying a heavy price for it. Look at what Egypt is going through, how difficult the economy in Egypt. Yet you'll find somebody who's actually using an airplane and going into, which one? That African country? With $300 million and so much gold. And how could you be so poor and yet be able to have so much money? How could you be so poor and build up palaces in Egypt? How could you be so poor and get a 747 that's cost you $1 billion to have for the leader?
So whether, sorry, I came late, so not sure whether this question was asked. Whether after every conflict, right, from 1947, I don't know that much of history, I just read it a few days back. After every conflict, I think Palestine has lost its land.
Yeah.
Right? It
Yeah.
shrink, the space has shrunk. Whether we are lacking a proper leader, because right after every, now also after this conflict, I'm not sure whether Gaza will be there. Maybe they might occupy it again. And what is the best solution for the Muslims also there? They are suffering, right? What solution they are ready to agree to? If suppose two-state solutions, right? What solution do you think?
Brother, the Palestinians in 1993 agreed to a two-state solution with basically they were not even getting all of their rights, but they agreed to it. The issue is that the Israelis at the time, who was the guy who actually orchestrated it on the Israeli side? They are the ones who went and killed him. They killed him. And then Israel, by the way, will never allow for peace. Their motto, by the way, their principle, their Talmud principle is to establish a state from the sea to the Furat, which includes Egypt, Iraq, Syria, portion. I mean, this is what their greater Israel, what they call a greater Israel. Now they're basically, even when the general who's attacking Gaza right now, do you know what he says? He says, the least we could do at this point is to at least take more land to deprive the Gazans from, so their purpose is to always take land, because to them land is precious and allows them for a certain amount of security, meaning that rather than fight within, but I don't know what, Gaza, the width of it is 5 miles. What are they going to take? There's not much to take. You either take it all or you lose it all. I mean, it's impossible for the Palestinians. I envy the Palestinians for their steadfastness and their resolve, because I do not know any other people who would be willing to fight such a monstrous army and be steadfast and is willing to sacrifice so much in order to gain victory. And that's exactly what the Palestinians are doing now. But the unfortunate part is that the Muslims are just watching. They're watching. They're doing nothing. None of the Muslim countries are doing anything. Whether it's Turkey, you have Erdogan. He says, okay, Hamas is not a terrorist organization. It's a resistance movement. So what kind of comments is going to help me? It's not going to help the Palestinians by issuing decrees and issuing comments and statements. You need, if you believe in the cause, you have a navy, you say, at least I'm going to deliver medical supplies and I'm going to take a chance and go against the Israeli army if I have to. But they're not willing to do that. Egypt, the same thing. Egypt has a military power. I don't know. I mean, if you saw yesterday, or the day before, they had al-Ard. They had a parade for the Second Army, al-Jaysh al-Thani, where you have almost 1,000 tanks and this. And even the guy from the army was saying that if we are able to do whatever we need to do, and then Sisi comes in, he says, don't be deceived by the fact that even if you have power, you need to be careful about how you use it. Well, what's the sense of having an army if you can't use it? What's the sense of building an army if you it reminds me of a story of a person who had a gun, and somebody was beating up his family, and he says, but you have a gun. He says, no, you see, I'm waiting till it's really needed. And then the next time they're beating the crap out of him, and he's still not using his gun. And he says, what is the matter? He says, oh, no, this is still, this is for really emergencies. How urgent can the issue be for you to use your army? I mean, and those guys, believe me, if they were to say, if somebody like Sisi, even though as bad as he is, if he was to come up and say, I am going to help the Palestinians and I'm going to take a chance, believe me, most of the people would probably forgive him for all his sins. And they would probably go and say, Sisi, long sleeve you. I mean, we are a forgiving society. We want somebody to take the lead, somebody who's decent to take the lead, but we can't find him. We can't find him. And it's sad. It's sad because Egypt, mashallah, they have a powerful army. They have the personnel. They have people dedicated. They have all of that, but they're not being used. In 1952, Egypt and South Korea, the economy of Egypt was better than that of South Korea. In 1952. 2023, Egypt cannot pay its own debt. And the average Egyptian is making very little money. And Guinea went from $6 at the time of Morsi to now $40 to a dollar. $40 to a dollar. So the average person is actually dying. They cannot buy meat. They cannot buy basic necessities because they don't have the money. And yet, he's extravagantly building a new capital, and he's building all kinds of palaces, and he's building all kinds of things. And then when he travels to see something, they have to actually have the red carpet for him. It's amazing. It's amazing how corrupt can he be. How insensitive can he be also. If your entire population, if 50% of your population is living under the poverty level, why do you brag about how, you flash things as if everything is hunky-dory? It's not.
I have a question, and I don't know if it's going to clear the confusion or something. One of my, he's supposed to be Muslim, but he calls himself secular. And he was telling me, look, this religion has always had problems. After the departure of the Prophet, you guys have never settled down, period. Like, you've never had a time of peace. You have always engaged into problems with either among yourself or with people of, whatever, other countries or. And he gave me the example. Like, look, 3 of your caliphs were martyred. So you have always been in some sort of like conflict. How do you answer that question?
Well, that question, I mean, if you call us, they killed the Khalifa, right? Three Khalifas. How many did the Israelites kill of prophets? يقتلون الأنبياء بغير حق. How many? They used to kill their own prophets. So they cannot point the fingers at us. I was listening to somebody who was talking about apostasy. In Islam, when somebody goes away from Islam, من يرتد منكم من يرتد عن الإسلام فاقتلوه, right? And then the Christians were actually making an issue out of it. And they're saying, why if I don't want to if I'm a Muslim and I want to change my religion, why should I be killed? Even though, by the way, I am a believer that al-hukm هذا is questionable, but don't answer them from your own faith. Answer them from their own. According to in their Bible, it says that if your father, mother, friend, brother asked you to to go away from your Christian faith, from your faith, kill him. Kill him. That's what their own book says. So sometimes when they point the fingers to us, okay, if you try to be logical with them, they're not going to believe it because, it's not their value system. But if you look at it and you say, like an example, they say, the same very people, they say, Christians, they say, well, Jesus never killed anybody. Jesus never killed anybody, but Muhammad did. And the Prophet Muhammad was only, according to our history, he only killed one person. But, and then he said to him, well, don't you believe that Jesus is God? They say, yeah, we believe he is God. Well, of course, we don't believe that. We don't believe he is the Son of God. We believe that he's a prophet. But to them, he's a God, right? Do you believe in the Old Testament? Yes, we do. Well, in the Old Testament, your God, Jesus, orders Moses to kill all the people of the Canaanites, to kill the children and the babies. So who is more dangerous and who's a killer? Us or you? So what I'm saying is that sometimes you have to be well learned in their faith to be able to answer their question, their concerns about what we believe in. Those are issues, there is a book called Shubuhat Hawla al-Islam. It's in Arabic, Qutb, what's Muhammad Qutb, Muhammad Qutb. But sometimes trying to answer something, the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. You remember when those two people came to him and he said, we have seen a dream, we wanted an interpretation. Did he answer them immediately? He didn't answer them immediately. He told them that we believe in one God and that everything, he's in total control. And that anything I am about to tell you is from knowledge that was given to me by the Almighty. Then he answered them. So if you do not agree, if somebody asks you about the branches, if you don't agree that the source is correct, don't discuss the furu', because you'll never come to an agreement, because he doesn't agree with you on the main principle. So unless you arrive at an agreement on the main principles, don't discuss those minor issues, because the Prophet ﷺ gives us a beautiful hadith. He says there will come a time when people will say, who created this? And you say, Allah. And then you say, who created this? And you say, Allah. And then you say, who created Allah? And he says, what does he say? He says, at that time, say, amantu billah. I believe in Allah. Because this is a Byzantine, they call it a Byzantine argument, meaning it's a useless argument. Just like with the argument with Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he says, when the guy says, when he talked about who can kill, who can give life, and who he says, I can give life and take it away. I mean, I can give it or take it away. He says, إن الله يأتي بالشمس من المشرق فأتي بها من المغرب فبهت الذي كفر. You have to take him away from an example that doesn't make any sense, that he can use against you. And then he took him what? To an area where this is what Allah is capable of. And this is what you're not capable of. But yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he tells us about وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَجَعَلَكُمْ أُمَّةً وَاحِدًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if he had wished, he would have made the entirety of mankind as one ummah. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا يَزَالُونَ مُخْتَلِفِينَ. Meaning that وَلِذَلِكَ خَلَقَهُم. Meaning that he made them different, and this is why he created them. Now the fact that we have so many people got killed and all that, because what Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he came, he technically created a revolution of social justice that was unheard of at the time. I mean, he changed everything. People of the Arabs were basically nothing. And he made him into an ummah. And all of a sudden, now they have that power that they don't know how to deal with it. And they have so many enemies. If you look at every single thing, whether it's the killing of Umar ibn Khattab, it was done by a kafir. It was not done by, Ali ibn Abi Talib and Uthman, it's a fitna. And if you look at it, prior to any fitna ever happening in the Muslim Ummah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, وَإِن فِئَتَانِ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ اقْتَتَلُوا فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَهُمَا فإن بغت إحداهما على الأخرى فقاتلوا التي تبغي حتى تفيء إلى أمر الله فإن فاءت فأصلحوا بينهما وأقسطوا إن الله يحب المقسطين. So as if the Prophet ﷺ, even the killing of his grandsons, he prophesied it. He told us that it will happen. He told us about the prophecy of Ali being killed. So all of these things are actually reassure us that وَمَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. That it is a divine revelation. That it is the word of Allah. And if you look at what Islam is, the Quran in Surah Al-Isra, what does he say? إِنَّ هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ يَهْدِي لِلَّتِي هِيَ أَقْوَمُ وَيُبَشِّرُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ الَّذِينَ يَعْمَلُونَ الصَّالِحَاتِ أَنَّ لَهُمْ أَجْرًا كَبِيرًا. Meaning that, what do you look for as a human being? You look for value. You look for what's best. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you, إِنَّ هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ يَهْدِي لِلَّتِي هِيَ أَقْوَمُ. Whatever good that you are looking for, you find it in the Quran. So whenever you have an issue, go back to the Quran. Read it to increase your iman. Because sometimes, if your iman gets weakened, the shaitan has it, you know why, subhanAllah, the Quran, when he uses sometimes terminology that tells you, وَإِذِ اسْتَزَلَّهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ بِبَعْضِ مَا كَسَبُوا. Shaitan, he cannot come into you and say, disobey Allah. He makes you, whenever you make a little mistakes, he takes advantage of it. فَاسْتَزَلَّهُمْ. He will try to make it beautiful. On the Day of Judgment, what does he say with Shaitan? دعوتكم فاستجبتم لي وما كان لي عليكم من سلطان. All I did when they complained to him, why did you do this to us? What does he say? I only asked you and you followed me. I did not force you. وما كان لي عليكم من سلطان. I didn't have the power over you. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, إن كيد الشيطان كان ضعيفا. The shaitan is weak. But we empower the shaitan by our actions. This is why you have to be, a Muslim is always trying to be on the safe side. You know, the Prophet ﷺ, as a prophet, he would say, اللهم يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلبي على دينك. He's a prophet. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the Prophet ﷺ, ولا تركن إليهم. He's reminding him, he's telling him what he can and cannot do. So we are more deserving of sometimes reading our Quran and understanding the commandments and applying those commandments. Because if those commandments were made to the Prophet, who is the best of mankind, who are we not to listen to those commandments?
I have one question.
Father.
So as I'm watching news all the day and all the night, regarding the Palestine and the Erdogan, like Turkey president and Egypt president, I don't consider them, they are like one unity, because Ummah is like kind of like, if somebody hurt, you feel it, the pain.
Yeah.
So like, I'm feeling for Palestinian, for any Muslim, it's not only Palestinian, any Muslim. But donation is going very well, donation company,
Yes.
they're asking for. So I'm asking, if we donate right now, they're not getting any kind of like medical suppliers and kind of like other stuff, you know what I mean? So they're still not getting what they want, right? Like medical suppliers and water, and
Yeah.
then I heard like,
The unfortunate part is that the US is already moving all kinds of equipments to the point where actually they have $4.4 billion worth of equipment within Israel that they had pre-positioned. They already gave it to them. They have equipment in Europe pre-positioned. They already advanced it to the, and then on top of that, they gave them the most sophisticated kind of armament that normally it's exclusive for the American army in order to use it against the Palestinians. So they are very complicit in this. And they are now working on a $14 billion package to give it to Israel. And yet, the Palestinians, sometimes they blame them for sometimes being decent with Iran, because Iran provides them with $23 million a month to help them in Gaza. And yet, all the Sunni nations, unfortunately, they're fighting them. They're describing them as a terrorist organization, even, which is the unfortunate part. Erdogan, you see, as a Muslim, as an individual, I have a connection to Gaza. I wasn't able to get in touch with him, but I was able to channel $2,100 to them, and inshallah I will channel another maybe $2,000, $3,000 in the next few days, if it opens up.
yeah, I just wanted to complete my last thing,
Yeah.
and then you can go ahead. So what we can do right now for Palestine, we are doing protest, we are doing everything what we can do, yeah?
Yeah.
But my question is, how can we get together and
Yeah.
help to them?
If there is a demonstration, go to it. If there is a video, if you have access to WhatsApp, use it. If you have access to all social media, try to post as much of the narrative, the Palestinian narrative, the suffering, because they are trying to dehumanize us. And once you dehumanize people, in Germany, you know what they used to call the Jews? Rats. And once you call rats, then if I can't kill a human being, but rats, 1 million, 6 million, I don't mind, kill them. And that's what they are trying to do. They're trying to describe us as animals, and they're trying to dehumanize the Palestinians. We need to humanize them. And how we do it? By getting involved, by saying whatever we can on all kind of social media, so that the American society, because look at it, the narrative is beginning to shift a little bit. People, a lot of Americans and a lot of even American Jews are now siding with the Palestinians, and it's pressuring the administration to the point where the administration that had certain instruction to the State Department what they can and cannot say, they're changing their narrative and they are on the defensive. So we need to do more of that. Will that be sufficient to overcome the problem? I don't know. But at least as an individual, I say on the Day of Judgment, oh Allah, I did what I can. Allah, the Prophet ﷺ tells us, في القرآن it says, دُعِنَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا مِنْ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ عَلَى لِسَانِ دَاوُودَ كَانُوا لَا يَتَنَهَوْنَ عَنْ مُنْكَرٍ فَعَلُوهُ. When they did munkar, the Quran tells us that they did not tell each other, that they did not enjoin goodness and forbid evil. The Prophet ﷺ elaborated on this ayah by saying, why did the people of the Israelites had la'na on them? He says, because كَانَ يَنْهَى الْمَرْءُ, he used to tell a person who's committing evil on that night, don't do it. But then on the following day, لَمْ يَكُنْ ذَلِكَ لِيَمْنَعَهُ أَنْ يَكُونَ جَلِيسَهُ وَقَعِيدًا. That did not stop him from being his companion and somebody that he sits with. So as a Muslim, you are supposed to try to do as much as you can in terms of enjoining goodness and forbidding evil. And the least you could do as a Muslim is try to help your brother in any way you can. Dua helps. Don't, dua مخ العبادة. Dua is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us. وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِي إِذَا دَعَانِ فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا لِي. But you see, he made it conditional. He said, فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا لِي. We need to be responsive to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We need to always abide by what Allah tells us. The problem is, as the Prophet ﷺ tells us, that a man sometimes, his money is haram, his acts are haram, everything is haram, فَيَدْعُوا فَأَنَّا يُسْتَجَابَ لُهُ. Meaning that he will do dua, but Allah will not answer it. Allah will not answer it when you are not a sincere Muslim who is abiding by all the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to do.
Assalamu alaikum, brother. As a layman, because I'm also having conversations at home and conversations in the company that I work for. What Hamas has done, they all are saying this all started with Hamas. Okay, we understand there's a history, 70 years of occupation, apartheid, treatment, behavior. You also talked about Oslo's, peace treaty between Yasser Arafat and Shimon Peres, for which they were given the Peace Prize, Nobel Peace Prize, and all that. All that is garbage now. So, knowing fully well that Israel is powerful, it's a nuclear weaponized state with the U.S. as the big brother backing them. In these circumstances, trying to initiate a fight, isn't it that we are trying to commit a suicide because it's not? We are only few. Hamas may be having some fighters, some sort of weapons, but will that match the armory and the power that Israel possesses?
Wallahi, if I take it from a non-religious viewpoint, I would agree with you, because I would say that logically I am a weaker and I should only fight a fight that I can win. I mean, that's logical. The issue is the Prophet ﷺ told us that we need, when he was forced to fight. You remember in the Battle of Uhud, the Prophet ﷺ, basically the Muslims were defeated and they took a beating. And they were going back to Medina. And now what happens? The kafirs, the munafiqeen of Quraysh, the kuffar of Quraysh, they said, let's go and finish the Prophet. He's weak now, they're beat, let's go and finish him. And the Prophet ﷺ, he says, he gathered the Muslims at the time and he says, only those who fought. Nobody knew. only those who fought, including the injured, let us go back and fight them. He didn't say, I am weak, let me try to work out an agreement with them. At that time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala interfered because He realized that they are in need of help. إِنَّ النَّاسَ قَدْ جَمَعُوا لَكُمْ فَاخْشَوْهُمْ. You know, that the people have gathered in order to... Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dismissed the Kafirs and sent them back to Mecca. So I'm saying is that as a Muslim, if Hamas did not do what it do, I am telling you, normalization with Saudi Arabia would happen. The Palestinian issue would begin to subside to the point where it's basically nobody is paying attention to it. It's already nobody is paying attention to it as is. But unless you bring it back to the forefront, what's going to happen? The Palestinian issue, I mean, look, we had the Oslo Accord. We talk about the Oslo Accord. What did we get out of the Oslo Accord? 600,000 more settlers in the West Bank. 600,000. You say that, okay, the Palestinians, you know, they try to يختزلوا, يعني they're trying to isolate the issue and make it an issue between Hamas and Israel. It's not an issue between Hamas and Israel. It's an issue between Palestinians, Muslims against Israel. The West Bank doesn't have Hamas people in it. Very few people. And what have they done to it? What have they done to it? Abbas, you know what he says, what Abbas says? He says, التنسيق الأمني مقدس, meaning intelligence cooperation with Israel is sacred. It's sacred. He makes another statement. He says, anybody who says al-Yahud is kuffar is kafir.
He's a sold-out leader, so...
I'm just saying, you have a sold-out leader, and you have somebody who's accommodating the Israelis to the last degree. And what do they do to... What is the benefit? That's what I'm saying. What is the benefit? If you succumb to all of this, and if you are willing to be passive, and willing to accept whatever the Israelis want, and you get nothing for it, except more agony and more punishment. Should you stick with it? No.
Where is the hidayah? I mean, where is the qiyadah and the leadership? Is it the Hamas leadership that is deciding the future of Palestine and the people? I mean, what? I mean, you know, when you assume you take the role, you
Listen.
want the role of leader, you have to understand that you are putting 2 million people at stake.
Yes, but are the 2 billion people complaining? No. They're not complaining. When I hear a man who's consoling a person who lost his cousin, and he's telling him, why are you sad? He's a shaheed. And then he says, I lost two of my kids, 22 and 19, 2. He says, لِذَلِكَ أَعْدَدْتُهُمْ. I prepared them for that. I prepared them for shahada. You need this kind of mentality. You need this kind of iman. We don't have it. I don't have that iman. I couldn't sacrifice my son like this. Wallahi, I don't. That's why they are different kind of people. They are people of Jannah. As far as I'm concerned, wallahi, they must be people of Jannah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, the ones who fight for the way of Allah, أولئك أعظم درجة من الذين أنفقوا من بعد وقاتلوا. They have a high status in the sight of Allah. And sometimes you think that, you know, hardship. The Prophet ﷺ had a hardship. Didn't he have a hardship to the point where he says, حتى يقول الرسول والمؤمنون والذين معه متى نصر الله? When is Allah going to give us victory? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ألا إن نصر الله قريب. The victory of Allah. So we need to be faithful to our faith. We need to adhere to that faith. We need to realize that once we do our best, wallahi, Allah will interfere on our behalf. But we must get to that level. We need to get to that level. We cannot be almost a secular in the way we think and the way we act. And then when we have difficulty, oops, we lose it. So yes, from a logical point of view, from a secular point of view, I agree with you. How could I fight somebody who's stronger? You know, listen, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the story about Jalut, كم من فئة قليلة غلبت فئة كثيرة بإذن الله. So if you look at it from an Islamic perspective, it's a different ballgame. Even if we lose Gaza, which inshallah we will not, believe me, I assure you that we will not, inshallah. It will not end in a good way for the Israelis or for the. And not only that, you know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says? In Surah Al-Anfal, what does he say? إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, the kafirs, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا يُنْفِقُونَ أَمْوَالَهُمْ لِيَصُدُّوا عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. The kafirs will spend their money so that they push you away from the way of Allah. فَسَيُنْفِقُونَها. They will spend it. ثُمَّ تَكُونُ عَلَيْهِمْ حَسْرَةً. And they will be miserable for it. Miserable. ليميز الله. Why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do that? ليميز الله الخبيث من الطيب ويجعل الخبيث بعضه على بعض فيركمه جميعا فيجعله في جهنم أولئك هم الخاسرون. So that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would know who is a righteous, who is the one who is true to his faith, who is a true believer, and who is not. And then once that is distinguished, and Allah knows, but He needs to establish the evidence on them. He doesn't have to do it in order to know who's going to be fail or who's going to win, but in order to have that as an evidence on their own. And He says, and then He throws them in hell. Those are the ones who are losers. So the shaheed is not a loser. Imagine if you have a shaheed, he intercedes on behalf of 70 of his family on the Day of Judgment. Who can be that lucky? That, who can guarantee Jannah? Al-Quran tells us, وَمَنْ زُحْزِحَ عَنِ النَّارِ وَأُدْخِلَ الْجَنَّةَ فَقَدْ فَازَ. He who is pushed away from hell and enters paradise, he is truly a winner. Imagine if you have a shaheed on your behalf on the Day of Judgment. Yeah.
We're going to call it then, inshallah.
Just one second to comment on my beloved brother. If you hear the news from Gaza, they were asking the same question. Said, we've been dying, we've been killed anywhere for the last 56 years. We've been killed. So it would not make a difference. They've been killed. They've been bombarded, they've been shot at, they've been barricaded. So they are in suffering that no one can imagine. No one on earth can imagine the suffering that those people are going through. So by them to fight, which it's our responsibility to support them, support Gaza, the Palestinian people, because they are defending the 32nd place on earth. If imagine this happened to Mecca or Medina, we would feel the same. They are doing that in our behalf. So we should all, we do not let anyone attack them or criticize them for what they have done. Because they are the victims. They are not the aggressor, they are the victims.
So if there's a practical solution, please go ahead.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله